Welcome to today's educational webinar hosted by the International Trade Council. My name is Ron Alasco, and I'm delighted to be your moderator for today's session. Before we begin, let's handle some quick housekeeping. Can everyone hear me? If so, please type yes in the chat box. All right, thank you. Good morning, everyone. All right, thank you. If you encounter any audio or visual issues, please let us know in the chat and we'll be assisting you. Lastly, please feel free to type your question in the Q&A box. We'll address them during the Q&A session. So let's get started. Our topic for today is U.S. Market Importer Intelligence. This webinar will cover key topics, including an introduction to the U.S. retail market, understanding its dynamic, effective retail sales strategies, marketing and branding approaches, and logistic and supply chain management essentials. Please join me in welcoming our speaker for today, Frank W. Buonanet, Vice President of Illumination Consulting. Go ahead, Frank.
Hello. Uh, Again, my name is Frank Buonanotte. I'm the Vice President of Illumination Consulting. We're a consulting firm in the United States, and among other things, we assist foreign companies with U.S. market entry. Um, so let's talk a little bit about the U.S. market, and we're going to be discussing um, how foreign companies or product-based businesses that are retail brands could get their products into the United States and on the shelves of retailers here in the U.S. Not the easiest thing in the world to do, but certainly possible. One thing to keep in mind is that there are more products available than there is available shelf space. So it is challenging. Again, not impossible. It just means that in order for your product to end up on a shelf, someone else's product has to come off. Now, that usually gets decided by the retail store when they realize that an existing product isn't really moving. So they take a gamble on a product that may do better. So one thing to know about the U.S. market is it is the largest consumer market in the world. The United States, as we all know, is not the largest country geographically. It's certainly not the largest country population-wise, but it does have the largest consumer market, meaning that U.S. consumers spend more money on consumer goods than consumers in any other country in the world, which means that there are tremendous opportunities for companies that have products overseas and want to sell here. Now, the two main ways of selling products in the United States are both online and offline, and we'll be talking about both of them today. Um, so let's see here. Okay. So one thing to keep in mind is that the culture in the United States may be drastically different, and most likely is drastically different than the culture in your country, which means that there may need to be some alterations to your product in terms of the packaging, the labeling, design preferences, that sort of thing. This is very important. It's also important to remember that statistically, 4 out of every 5 U.S. market entry attempts fail. Now, I don't say that to discourage any of you, but I say it to emphasize the importance of making sure that some of these small little things are done properly. And an example of how a very large company made some small mistakes that ended up costing them millions of dollars. In the 1970s, the United States had a U.S. There was a U.S. car manufacturer, an automaker, that released a car that they referred to as Nova was the name of the car. Now, In English, nova is a galactic explosion, sort of like when a star explodes. So, the image that they were trying to portray with releasing this car into the market was that it was going to make a big splash in the auto industry. So they wanted to kind of give it a name with a big bang. And International sales were actually very good, except in South America. And they couldn't understand why at first. But when they looked into it further and really gave it some thought, they come to realize that obviously in South American countries, um, Spanish is predominantly the language spoken, with an exception of Brazil, which is mostly Portuguese. But in Spanish and consequently in Portuguese, nova, Nova, um, means no go. No va in Spanish and Portuguese means no go. So trying to sell a car that is called no go in their local language is not a way to really sell that kind of a product. So something as little as that could make a huge impact, either negatively or positively, on your sales in the United States. Now, the good part about the U.S. Is that it is multicultural. There are many different cultures here, whereas in some countries around the world, it gets a lot more narrow. People from all over the world live here in the U.S., so there is a lot of diversity. Um, but one thing that is very different is that the let's talk about design preferences. In some countries, we've noticed that certain colors are favored, particularly in websites like pastels, pastel colors. Here in the United States, pastels are viewed to kind of represent springtime or Easter, which is a holiday that we celebrate because there are a lot of Catholics and Christians in the U.S. Um, Whereas a lot of navy blues are kind of considered as corporate colors. So that's one thing to take into consideration. Colors can play a huge role in how a product or brand is perceived. And that goes without saying with any country, but the US has its own preferences, is the point that I'm trying to make. A lot of discount brands use prime colors like red, orange, yellow, um, and uh, a lot of luxury brands use colors that are more specific, like taupe or hunter green. So if you have a luxury brand and you use a primary color like red, for example, it may be perceived as a lower discount brand. And if that's not the image you want, or if that's not the vision you have for your product, then that might be something that needs to be changed. Also, even though the United States doesn't really have an official language, unofficially English is of course the number one spoken language. So all packaging has to be written in English, especially for items that are regulated by the Food and Drug Administration or the FDA. These are products that are used in or on the body. So we're talking about a food item or a skincare product, because if taken or if ingested orally or used topically on the skin, if someone doesn't understand what's in it, or what the use is, it could be harmful for that person. So regulations are a little bit more specific for that. So English is definitely uh, uh, the language that has to be on the labels. Like in Canada, for example, labels have to be in both English and French. So if you are uh, interested in getting products into North America does include both the United States and Canada, technically. So the US, the language would be English on the labels. In Canada, they would have to be both English and French. So, as far as how to actually get the products here, this is something that a lot of people are confused about and really don't know where to start. So let's talk about them in greater detail. um, a foreign company or the owner of a foreign company or a representative from a foreign company can always make a call, can always spend some time here and walk in the door and shake hands and try to generate interest in their product. But it's very time consuming and not the best way to go about doing that. Every industry has independent sales reps, or in some cases, they're referred to as manufacturers representatives. These independent sales reps are individuals that work for themselves. They have no products themselves, but what they do have are relationships with um, the buyers and the category managers of the various retail stores where you can sell your products. And the benefit here is they're already in the door. They already have a pre-existing relationship with the people at the retail stores that make the decisions as to what products are sold in those stores. So that's a huge advantage that these folks have that you may not have, at least not in this country, because you're new and your brand is less recognized here. So since these independent sales reps are already presenting other products and are probably selling other products to these retailers, it's a lot less effort for them. Let's say they could be in the office meeting with one of the buyers or category managers, someone who makes a decision on what products to sell in that retail store. Before they leave, they can always turn around and say, "Look, I'm representing this new line of products. Is this something that you would want to take a look at or consider?" Now, as far as how to find these independent sales reps, well, these independent sales reps um, specialize in certain categories. So, if your product is a skincare or cosmetic or personal care product, it's probably the category is probably going to be health and beauty aid. If your product is a wallpaper or something for home interiors, then home decor is probably the category. So every industry, every vertical market has its own independent sales reps that specialize in working with those types of products. Now, another thing to take into consideration is these sales reps generally don't cover the entire country. So if your interest is to sell products throughout the United States or throughout North America, you'll have to establish a network of independent sales reps. And I would suggest starting off with some of the more densely populated areas. So in the United States, the most densely populated states are always going to be New York, California, Texas, Florida, uh, and Illinois. So those are your most populated areas and probably a good place to start. So how do you find these reps? Well, I mean, you can start off with a Google search looking for either independent sales reps or manufacturers reps um, in a particular category and in a particular state. The reason why a lot of these sales reps work by region. You may find a sales rep that only works in Pennsylvania or only handles Southern California or the Northeast United States. And the reason for this is these guys are handshakers. They like to walk into the store, they like to have the product in their hand if that's feasible. And, you know, they do a lot to develop these relationships. they've been working with these buyers and category managers for years, and it's usually a face-to-face type of relationship, which is good for you because for folks trying to sell products from another country into the United States, then you don't really have. It's not practical to always be here and have people boots on the ground who can uh, present your products for possible consideration. So, um, if it's a small retail store, then you might be able to connect with the owner or the general manager. Those are the people who are making decisions as to what products get sold in those stores. If it's a larger retail chain, then they have what's called either a buyer or a category manager. If it's a store that sells multiple categories, each category may have its own separate manager that makes decisions as to what products are sold. Another thing to take into consideration is that um, distributors could be a good way to go. Now, a distributor is an entity that will sell products to a retail store. And the reason why this exists, if it's a small retail store, then that retail store may be willing, interested, or capable of interacting directly with um, the manufacturer or the brand itself. But if it's a large retail store, especially retail stores that are not only large, within the store, but also large in terms of having multiple locations. Some retailers in the United States have thousands of locations. It's impossible for a store of that size at the end of the month when they need to um, uh, reorder their inventory to contact hundreds or even thousands of brands. There's just not enough time. So what they'd rather do is contact one, two, maybe three, the most distributors that have all the products they need to stock their shelves. It's a lot easier for them to go to one entity that has all of the products they need to sell in their store and just place an order and have a big truck come to deliver all of the goods. So there's no rule to this. I mean, it's different in every store. For example, before uh, Amazon bought Whole Foods, which is a natural food supermarket, they separated their store locations into 12 regions throughout the United States, and each region had its own separate buyers. So it's different in every store. When I tried to get my products sold into um, Kmart, then they had their corporate offices in Chicago, and they made all the decisions there for all of the retail stores throughout the country. So it really depends. This varies from retailer to retailer, whether or not they make all of the decisions at the corporate office or whether the decisions are made by region. And it really varies as to which is more ideal, because if a corporate office makes the decisions as to what purchases, what products to sell, um, if the corporate office likes your product and decides they want to sell it, then you're in all of their locations nationwide. Now, they may not decide to unleash your products onto all of their locations. They may decide to test it in one or two stores, and if it gets a good response from their customers, then they may decide to uh, sell the product in all of the retail locations nationwide. Uh, some larger retailers that may subdivide the regions and make decisions individually. Uh, Sometimes, if the corporate office says no, they don't want to carry your product. If the retailer subdivides its regions, then you still have a shot at some of the other regions. So it's both good and bad depending on what the initial answer is. If the initial answer is yes, we'll carry your products and distribute them within our store locations, um, then it's great. If it's bad, if the answer is no, then it's bad. You're not getting into that location. Another thing to take into consideration in terms of actually getting your products over here is the use of an export manager. Now, an export manager is very similar to a sales rep. The main difference is um, instead of that individual being here in the United States and having relationships with buyers and category managers here, this might be someone in your country that is interested in exporting product into the United States. So this is someone that might be local to you that has relationships with buyers in the US. So that means that there are two different places that you can look for assistance in getting on the shelves. One could be sales reps that are already here in the US and have relationships with US retailers, and then export managers that may be in your country but are in the business of exporting product into the United States. In that case, they probably already have relationships. So it's always a lot easier to tap into someone else's relationships if you don't have the relationships yourself. So that's one thing to consider. Also, online retailers like Amazon, Amazon's the biggest, but there are other online retailers have been taking a pretty big bite out of the retail business. I mean, Amazon, is available in many other countries. Not every country, but they do sell internationally. But in the U.S., a lot of U.S. consumers have been really warming up to the idea of um, online retail, especially the younger generation. We're still in an interesting time where some of the older generation, um, they grew up in a world where there was no technology, there was no internet, and they had to adapt. The younger generation, uh, technology is the only world that they know. They started using mobile devices and computers at an early age. If they could walk and if they can speak, they were probably using a tablet or a smartphone. So they're not as intimidated by technology. So the younger generations um, are probably more willing and interested in placing an order online. And this is actually good because if you want to expose your product to US consumers, well, you can do it from wherever you are in the world. The biggest issue is shipping. So the solution to getting the product from where you are to the US consumer is not by shipping it from your location, but to develop a relationship with um, a fulfillment warehouse in the United States. Now, a fulfillment warehouse is they're all over the place. There are thousands of fulfillment warehouses. Trying to find one to do business with is not a challenge. It could be a warehouse that's maybe 100,000 square feet. It could be enormous, and it probably stores product for many different types of companies from all over the world. If you ever walk through one of these warehouses, you would see, everything from food items to motorcycles to, flooring tile to, all different types of. There's really no limit to unless the product is so big that it can't fit into the warehouse. But for regular consumer goods, um, these warehouses will agree to store your product and they'll charge you for how much shelf space you take up. This is a lot easier than having your own warehouse. If you had your own warehouse, the expenses are enormous. That's something to consider once you're already established and have distribution within the United States. But when you're just starting out to, kind of get your products here, better to work with a fulfillment warehouse, because when you have your own warehouse, you have to pay rent on that warehouse, and rent in the United States is very expensive. And it doesn't really matter if your warehouse is full or empty, you still have to pay the same amount. Whereas in a fulfillment warehouse, if you have a lot of inventory, you're taking up more shelf space, the warehouse will charge you a little bit more. But as your inventory gets depleted and you're taking up less room on their shelves, then they'll charge you less. So the monthly fee for them to store your product could fluctuate depending on uh, how much product you have over there. And then once you get an order, whether that order is on your website or another website like Amazon or a retail store, um, the uh, fulfillment warehouse can be notified, and they will package the product up and ship it out. Amazon has kind of spoiled U.S. consumers because they have very often they offer free shipping, and your package arrives a day or two later. If someone has to wait more than a week to get a package in the United States, they have no patience for that. If someone has to wait several weeks, forget about it. You've lost your sale. So to get a product from Europe or Asia or South America or any other continent into the United States, it could take a while, depending on what your method of shipment is. And even if it is quicker, it's going to be expensive. And who's going to absorb that expense? The customers don't even like to pay for shipping anymore now that Amazon offers free shipping. So to ship a product from another country into the United States, not only is it going to take more time, but it's also going to be more expensive. And if the client isn't paying for it, that means that your company is paying for it, which is going to eat into your profits. So it's a lot easier to ship products by the pallet or by the container to the US and have them stored in a local warehouse waiting for someone to place an order. Now, when it comes to real estate in the United States, and I'm guessing around the world, the most expensive real estate at the top of the list is retail space, because retail space has to be in a prominent area somewhere on Main Street where everyone can see the store. So retail space, the rent is always higher. Office space comes in just underneath that, and warehouse space is, of course, the cheapest, because uh, an office space doesn't necessarily have to be on the main road, but it has to be not far from the main road. It has to be accessible. There are some times when a client could visit an office, so it still has to have a professional look. But a warehouse, no one really sees a warehouse except for the people who work there. So it could be in a bad part of town. It could be in the middle of nowhere. Um, and that, of course, brings the rent down. It also doesn't really have to look good. It can look very basic. And whereas a retail store has to have a good presentation. So this is another advantage to getting your products into an online retail location, because an offline retail location like a brick and mortar retail store, they're paying the highest rent, which means that they're probably going to have less space available. Whereas an online retailer probably has their own warehouse, and they may be more willing to carry your product because it's just taking up a little bit of space in a warehouse where it doesn't have to be that visible or visible at all to customers, because the picture is being placed on the website. And if someone places the order on the website, then the product gets shipped directly to the customer. So that makes getting your product sold in online stores a lot easier than into retail stores. One thing that I forgot to mention about distributors, which then sell to retail stores, is there could be hundreds or even thousands of retail stores that are purchasing from these distributors. So you can get your product into one distributor and be sold in retail stores across the United States virtually overnight because they all order product from the same distributor. Just be aware that you'll have to have a multi-tiered pricing structure because a distributor is going to want to have a lower price than the retailer because the distributor is selling to the retailer. So you'll have your retail price, which is the price that you're selling your product probably on your website, and it's the price that retail stores will sell your products to consumers and end users. The wholesale price obviously is the price that retail stores will expect to buy the product. These wholesale prices, depending on the industry and the product, very often are 100% markup. So if you're selling your product for $50 per unit, the retail store is going to want to spend $25 and mark it up to $50. So that means that the distributor needs to buy that product even less than the wholesale price because then they have to mark it up to the wholesale price to sell to the retail stores. And generally speaking, most distributors usually like to get about 30% margin on theirs because their costs are less. The reason why the retail stores charge uh, or want to mark up the product 100% is because they have the most expenses. Retail space is expensive, like I indicated earlier, so they probably have a large showroom that they're paying a lot of rent for. They have employees, they have to do a lot of advertising, so they have more expenses. The distributor has less expenses because their product isn't in a retail store, it's in a warehouse, which I had indicated earlier is more cost effective and far less expensive than the rent of a retail store. And they also probably do a lot less advertising because retailers just know that they exist because they have to get their product from them. So that being said, when it comes to developing a multi-tier pricing structure, where you want your formula to be, usually, I wouldn't recommend that any brand. Again, this is going to vary depending on the type of product, but for most products, I wouldn't recommend at your lowest price point making less than a 30% margin, hopefully more. So the difference between your cost to manufacture the product and the distributor price shouldn't be less than a 30% margin, because if you're making less than 30%, it's like, why even bother? You have to make something. You're not in this business just to earn your place in heaven. You do want to make some money. So there, the distributor will mark up the product an additional 30% to get up to the wholesale price, and then the retailer will buy the product at the wholesale price and then mark it up 100%. I would also try to include a 10% buffer between your price and the distributor price, because if before we were talking about independent sales reps, most independent sales reps work on a commission only, and historically that commission is usually about 10%. So the good part about this is a lot of these independent sales reps won't ask for any money from you up front. They may ask you for samples. This way they can present actual product to retailers. They may ask for sell sheets, which is basically a sort of almost like a brochure of the product that is meant for wholesale and B2B. But other than literature and samples, that's usually most of what it takes to get started with the independent sales reps. Um, the bad part is if they do get you a client, they're going to want 10% of everything that you make for the entire lifespan of that client. So, in other words, if the retail store is ordering product from you for 5 years, then for 5 years, you're paying um, uh, your sales rep a 10% commission on all sales from that customer, that retail store for 5 years. So better to build that into your price than have that 10% commission come out of your profit. So keep that in mind. There are some sales reps that work on a retainer basis. You have to watch those because then there's less of an incentive for them to actually get you business. Uh, there are some sales reps that identify themselves as master brokers, and these are valuable brokers to have on your side because the reason why they refer to themselves as master brokers is because they already have relationships with other brokers or sales reps in other regions. So they may be able to help you to set up that network of sales reps across the country. So very often, what will happen is a master broker may require a retainer. That means that you have to pay them a certain amount of money every month for them to do business with you and to work for you. But the sales reps that work under them in different regions probably work on a commission only basis. So that's something to keep in mind. Um, so going on to the next slide here, when it comes to marketing, um, online marketing is the most cost effective and if done properly, it works. So when you really think about what types of marketing is out there, um, I mean there's SEO, there's social media marketing, there's content marketing, there's video marketing. There are many different strategies. You can have a TV commercial, you can have a magazine ad, you can have a newspaper ad. Um, uh, you can have a billboard on the side of the road. There are a lot of different ways to let your customers know or your potential customers know that you're now selling product in the United States. Um, Billboards on the side of the road are very expensive. TV commercials could cost you millions. Uh, Paper publications are less common these days. Years ago, we used to have paper magazines, paper newspapers. People don't really consume their news or entertainment that way anymore. It's mostly digital. And that's why digital marketing, I believe, is the best bet. When analyzing the different uh, types of marketing strategies, um, SEO, social media, and blogging is what we typically recommend. Those three, when done together, usually uh, yield the best results because the two main ways that people find product in the United States as well as around the world is by searching on the internet, mostly through Google, and on social media. Statistics show that the average American adult spends between 2 to 3 hours a day on the various social media platforms. The average younger adult could spend up to 4 to 5 hours a day. So if your product is appealing to a younger adult like Gen Z or millennials, then social media is definitely a place that you have to be. SEO is complicated. I would definitely recommend hiring an SEO company. We offer SEO services, or there are many other companies within the United States that offer SEO services. SEO doesn't necessarily have to be done in the U.S. It could be done anywhere. uh, but it's very technical and the rules are always changing because Google doesn't want to make it easy for you or any brand to get good organic ranking. What they'd rather do is frustrate you into buying an ad because that's how Google makes money. So, what works in SEO today may not work for SEO next year. So, if you're trying to do it internally, you have to be using someone who is up to date on all of the algorithm changes. Otherwise, you could have SEO placement one day and be completely wiped out the other day. That's why it's always good, I believe, to use an SEO vendor to make sure that you have good organic placement. When it comes to ROI ratios, an ROI ratio really refers to how much money you can expect to make as a result of the marketing strategy. So, for example, paid pay per click or Google ads or any kind of paid advertising on social media or a search engine generally has a 2-to-1 ROI ratio. That means for every dollar that you spend on marketing, um, you should expect to make $2 in return. Now, some people might think that that's great. I can't even make a 2-to-1 ratio in the stock market, but when you consider that a strategy like SEO offers a 5-to-1 to a 20-to-1 ROI ratio, then for the same amount of money that you're spending on your Google ads, you can be launching an SEO campaign that more people will find online. The biggest problem that people have with social media, and this is with foreign companies and US companies, is that they forget that social media are basically entertainment based platforms. So no one really likes an ad. I'm not saying ads aren't effective. I mean, everyone can see a TV commercial of a local pizzeria or a local food company, and it looks delicious, and it makes them want to eat that food. But advertisements have been interrupting our favorite TV shows since we were kids. Every time we watch a video, the video gets interrupted with an ad. People really don't like ads because no one really wants to be sold. When a company tries to sell its product, everyone knows that the company really just kind of wants to make money. So how credible is that ad? Um, on social media, when people see an ad, they usually flip through it in their feed because it's boring and it doesn't really give them very much value. Um, what we do when we're managing a client's social media accounts and doing the social media marketing is to add value to that follower. So if instead of just showing pictures of your product, like for example, if you're selling a food item or a skincare item, uh, instead of just showing a picture, posting a picture of the product, talk about the product, talk about the efficacy of the product, what the product does, what it's good for, what are some of the benefits, what are the ingredients in the product that are healthy, what isn't in the product that makes it healthy. Does the product have the absence of chemical based or synthetic ingredients, unhealthy preservatives that could harm you if you ingest them or apply them topically to your skin, um, or what use could the product have? What could you use the product for? People want to learn. People use social media for either entertainment, to be either entertained or informed. So there may not be anything entertaining about your product, but what people really want is information. Even if they're looking to buy a product, what they really are doing online is looking to find the information that they need to find the criteria as to which product to buy or who to buy the product from. So, adding value to their feed by giving them good information is really the way to get people um, to buy your product. Same thing with the blogs. What a lot of people don't realize is that Google favors blogs. Google will always rank a blog page higher than any other page because it has information. So even though SEO is important and could probably get you a lot of traffic and a lot of visitors and a lot of buyers, a lot of customers, um, when searching on Google or any other search engine, these search engines are geared to push blogs to the top because they have new, fresh, valuable content. So write about your products, convince people as to why they should be buying them. Write a blog about it. If your website doesn't have a blog, add a blog. Um, Talk to your designer and have them include a blog. Write blog posts every week. Get them on there because more people will find your blogs on Google than find your homepage. If English is not your primary language, you may want to consider hiring a social media marketer or a content marketing expert in the United States. We offer those services as well. This way, your English is good and your presentation is proper. So it's been 45 minutes. I have a lot more I could talk about, but I know that I have to leave some time open for questions.
All right. Um, Thank you for that presentation, Frank. So I'm seeing some questions here, but before we proceed with the Q&A, I would like to make some announcement. So this webinar is recorded and it will be uploaded to our YouTube channel, International Trade Council, and everyone will receive a certificate of participation for attending this webinar. And also, before we move to the Q&A, I'd like to take a moment to highlight Adam FTD. It's a powerful platform developed by ICTM, which is under ITC as well. So if you're interested to streamline your trade compliance processes and gaining deeper market intelligence, Adam FTD offers an incredible suite for tools to help your business stay ahead in ever-changing global trade landscape. So for more information to get started, please feel free to reach out to us and we'd happy to connect you with right resources. So we're open for questions here. I have see some questions. So you can type in your question in the Q&A box or in the chat box. So let's have her. The first one, please advise, is the Spanish language not important for Hispanic community and are beauty products widely respected manufactured in India popular?
Uh, there is a very large Spanish speaking population in the United States. In fact, just under English, I would venture to say that Spanish is probably the second most spoken language in the United States, and that could vary from state to state. The United States is a very large geographic region, and going from state to state is almost like going from country to country in Europe geographically. And uh, the distance sometimes also there could also be different microcultures between states. The northern states are very different from the southern states. The eastern states are very different from the western states. People think differently. People prefer different things. Um, in certain parts of Florida, there could be much more Spanish speaking people than, people in Wyoming, another state, in the Midwest. To play it safe, you want to stick to English because almost everyone in the United States does speak English, and the FDA will have requirements that labels are in English. So that's one thing to take into consideration. As far as where products are manufactured, Americans are very patriotic, probably more so than in some other countries. So, made in America or made in USA is important to some people and less important to others. So, there are a tremendous amount of products that are bought today in the United States that are not manufactured here and they're wildly successful. So, a product manufactured in India, China, or anywhere else is still a product that can be tremendously successful in the United States.
Thank you. So we have a next question here. Please advise the most important aspect of always gaining the respect of any corporate buyer or any buyer is that product must reach the actual user or end user. What are the most effective marketing strategies one can employ?
Well, you very seldom get a second chance when presenting to a corporate buyer. So, if you're not ready for that um, for that size of a retailer, you're done. You won't get a second meeting. So, the corporate buyers are very unforgiving in that aspect. A lot of the larger retailers have big demands. They may require you to advertise in their in-store circular or newsletter. They may require you to appear at certain trade shows from time to time. They may require you to guarantee that your product is going to sell. And the way they do that is if your product doesn't sell, they may require you to buy it back from them, give them, meaning take the product back and give them their money back. Retail stores, especially offline brick and mortar stores, know they have the upper hand. So my recommendation would be to start off with smaller retailers, because a lot of the big retailers will ask you, where else are you selling your product? And if you don't have an answer, they're probably retail stores don't like to take the gamble. They want you to take the gamble. So start off with the smaller retail stores and then work your way up to the larger retail stores. Um, and again, when it comes to the marketing strategies, I'm a big fan of SEO, social media, and blogging as primary marketing strategies. Secondary marketing strategies, I like press releases. You can write a press release for free. There are some press release sites that charge a small amount of money. You can find press release submission sites online. Usually, all you have to do is really kind of sign up with an email address and a password, write a press release, which is usually an announcement. You can announce that you're now selling your product in the United States or North America, and that could be a good strategy. Also, micro influencers could be a very powerful way to get your product here. There are a lot of smaller influencers that just review products. You can see them on video platforms like YouTube and TikTok. Email them, say, look, we'd like to send you some free product with the understanding that you would give us a video review on your platform. If they agree to do it, that video review could have more credibility than an ad, because an ad is just you trying to sell your product. A video review is just some random person talking about their experience using your product. So it has more credibility because they know that that person giving the review has nothing to gain or lose by what they say. So people take it more seriously.
Thank you. All right, next question. What is your general take on exports from India once President Trump takes office and put tariffs in place?
Well, every every politician, when they're trying to get elected, says, we're going to bring manufacturing back into the United States. We're going to bring jobs back into the United States. And, that's things like that are great to say to try to get elected, because, like I said, Americans are very patriotic, um, and they want to see prosperity in their country. The problem is what trumps Americans' patriotism is their wallet. And if they could buy a product from another country that's cheaper, that means more to them than their patriotism. So if a product can be manufactured cheaper in India or the United States or Vietnam, um, that means more to Americans. Spending less for a product means more to Americans than anything else. I do think that Donald Trump will be successful in bringing some manufacturing back into the United States, but not all. because it's just not practical. It would cost too much money to buy a product. Like, for example, smartphones are typically made in China and other Asian countries. If those products were manufactured in the United States, they would be unaffordable. No one would want to buy them. So there's still a place um, uh, for international manufacturing and being incorporated into the U.S. Consumer market.
Thank you. Next question. I deal with export of cutting tools. Wonder how difficult it is to sell Indian engineering products in the USA.
Not very difficult. Like I said, there are some products where the country of origin may be more important to the consumers than others. Cutting tools, frankly, I don't think anyone would care where they're manufactured. So, if um, if the if there's a demand for those products in the United States, I don't think it would matter much that I don't think it would matter much to U.S. consumers that they were manufactured in India. I think that if the price was lower because they were manufactured in India, because labor is typically less expensive in India, then I think that would matter favorably to U.S. consumers. So, like I said, made in the USA does have a buzz. There are Americans that like to buy American-made products, but what's more important than that is a cheaper product, cheaper meaning less expensive. Americans and U.S. consumers are very cost conscious. Um, the economy is getting better, but the last administration we had really took a bite out of our economy. And Everyone, especially in the wake of the pandemic, everyone is cost conscious and looking to spend less money. And that opens up a lot of opportunities for products that are manufactured overseas.
All right. So I think this one is a comment. So please note we have to mark up products by about 100% to incorporate cost of independent sales rep, transportation and duties, and added to the distributor cost and some profit for your company. The retailers marks up another 100%.
Again, that's going to vary from industry to industry. There are some products that have a higher markup. There are other products that have a lower markup. For example, cars usually have a very low markup. Electronic equipment has a very low markup. Furniture has a very high markup. So, it really depends on the industry and industry standards. Um, just like anywhere, industry standards form naturally based on supply and demand. So if the supply is higher than the demand, then the cost goes down because there are less people that need the product. And naturally, if the demand exceeds the supply, then the price goes up. So, it's balanced out by supply and demand, and it will vary from uh, industry to industry. In some industries with certain products, there could be tremendous room for markup. But generally speaking, retailers do like to mark the product up 100% so that they can get their profit from it. The type of products you have may have enough of a margin to be able to have that on top of your markup. Chances are, if you have to you have to do a pricing analysis in your industry to see what type of pricing there is, and try to reverse engineer the pricing based on what other people are charging for that product in the US.
All right, thank you, Frank. I don't see any more question here. So before we conclude our educational webinar for today, Frank, anything you would like to add? Closing remarks for this presentation.
Yeah, any closing remarks? I mean, our company does have consultants. I am a consultant, And for anyone that needs help getting into the United States, getting the product sold in the United States, we are available for consulting. We offer other services like website design and development and digital marketing. So those strategies that I mentioned before, SEO, social media, blogging, we do them. Sometimes we have graphic designers on staff. So if your labels need to be modified to include English or US preferences, that's something we can help with. If your website needs to be modified, to toggle between your language and English, or some different design preferences, that's something that we can help with. But more importantly, having a consultant hold your hand through the process of trying to break into the U.S. market makes it a lot easier, and I can certainly make myself available. I will be emailing all of the attendees with some specials, special discounts, for participating in this webinar, if there's an interest there.
All right, thank you. So I added Frank's email address here in the chat box. So if anyone would like to reach out to him directly, but as I mentioned earlier, he will be sending you an email if so that he can do a follow up for this. But Frank, before we go, I have there's a last question here from the audience, so maybe we can answer this right now.
Sure.
Is US FDA necessary for exporting food and beverages from India, or India FDA would suffice?
No, when you're importing a food item into the U.S. at customs, it'll have to clear both the FDA and the USDA. Now, a lot of this is handled by the freight forwarder and customs broker. So whoever is transporting the product into the United States, they might be able to help you with all the customs procedures. This way, you don't have to know what they are. But any product that's sold in the United States, if it's a food product, it has to meet the minimum requirements. The good part of that is the USDA and the FDA regulations for food items in the United States is very low. In fact, most of the food that is sold here in the United States is banned in 30 countries. So my guess is if it's meeting the FDA equivalence minimum requirements in India, it's probably meeting FDA requirements in the United States. The food here is very very low, very low quality in my opinion. I think they're poisoning us to grow our food. Food in other parts of the country are much healthier than they are here. So you may need to make sure that your product meets minimum requirements, but it's probably not going to be hard to do that.
All right, thank you. So thank you, Frank, for your insightful presentation. And
My
thank you
pleasure.
all the participants for joining us today. On behalf of the International Trade Council, we appreciate your time and engagement, and we hope you found this session valuable and informative. Again, please feel free to reach out to Frank, and he will be sending you an email for a follow up for this webinar. If you have any questions or need additional resources, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. Thank you once again, and we look forward to seeing you to our future webinar. Thank you, Frank, and you all have a
Thank you.
wonderful day.
Okay.